Hi, everyone. This is the Learn to Hunt podcast. I'm Pake Wise. I'm the Hunter Education Coordinator for Department of Wildlife. The series is going to be presented by the Department of Wildlife. Today, we're going to talk about duck ID. We're here with our waterfowl biologist, Paxton Smith. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get into it. So, Paxton?
Cool. Yeah, Paxton Smith. I'm the migratory game bird biologist for the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. My job is to basically monitor waterfowl across the state. Waterfowl, so migratory game birds. That's waterfowl, doves, other webless migratory game birds. Stuff like coots, gallinules, rails, woodcock, all that stuff. So we basically make sure that the populations are doing good. That way we can set season dates, bag limits, things like
Mhm.
that.
Cool. So, how did you get into being a biologist? Like, what's the backstory there?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of other options for my lifestyle. So, grew up hunting and fishing. Well, when I'm not hunting or fishing, I'm generally thinking about it. So went to college, got a degree in environmental biology. I did that up in Wisconsin. I was able to work for their DNR a couple years monitoring aquatic vegetation on the Mississippi River. Uh, Aquatic vegetation, ducks, they kind of go hand in hand. So whenever I saw ODWC job post for a wetland technician or migratory bird technician, I was able to jump into that. Did that for a year, was able to promote to the migratory bird biologist.
Cool. So specifically though, why waterfowl? Like you could have gone biology's a big spectrum there. So why specifically waterfowl? Is that just like a passion of yours or
Well, sometimes you just get lucky. I'm
yeah.
very passionate about waterfowl, stuff like that, wetland habitat. And then the door was open, and I just decided to take the chance and ended up getting the job. So I've been doing it for about 4 years now.
Awesome. Awesome. So like I said, we're gonna talk about some duck ID, but before we get into that, just what are the general like licensing that a person would need to go hunt waterfowl?
Sure. So to go duck or goose hunting, you're going to need uh, a hunting license,
Hmm.
annual hunting license. The 5 day is not valid for waterfowl hunting. You're going to need that. You're going to need a state duck stamp. The Oklahoma lifetime license covers the state duck stamp. So if you have a lifetime license, you don't need to worry about that. You're going to need, so you'll need to purchase that if you just are purchasing an annual hunting license. You're going to need a HIP permit. That's the Harvest Information Program
Hmm.
permit. It'll ask you a couple questions about what your last year harvest was, and we use those numbers to sort of make estimates for different migratory bird harvests
Hmm.
each year. And then after that, you're going to need a federal duck stamp.
Okay.
So that federal duck stamp is good for any states, but you're still going to need the other state required licenses.
Okay. So is on the federal, well, I guess the federal duck stamp may be a little different, but with the federal and state duck stamps, is that money earmarked specifically for waterfowl, or does that just go back to general bio or general conservation for the department?
Yeah, the state duck stamp money goes directly towards our wetland development unit
Okay.
program. So these are areas that we develop and manage just for waterfowl hunting
Cool. Well, that
and
actually,
waterfowl habitat.
yeah.
So
Well, and that kind of brings us to our next point is where do people go? I mean, I know the department has quite a bit of land for that, and there's a bunch of different reservoirs in the state that allow it. But could you give us a little more information on that?
yeah, Oklahoma's got a very diverse range of waterfowl habitat. We got stock ponds that have been constructed across the state. The really good waterfowl habitat in most of those. Corps of Engineer lakes. Usually the upper end of them has kind of a alluvial plain or kind of a marshy area
Hmm.
that's good duck habitat. For the most part, dabbling ducks need about less than 18 inches of water to be able to feed. So that provides some pretty good habitat. And then there's city lakes across the state that have different, you know, duck blind drawings, regulations that you'll
Hmm.
need to check with the individual municipality before you go hunt some of those areas. And then, yeah, we have our wetland development units. So we have those statewide. You can find maps of those on our wetland. And then throughout the duck hunting season, we post a waterfowl and wetland status report that will have conditions at those areas that we manage.
Good. Cool. So we kind of touching back, I guess, back on regulation. Um, like I said, we're going to cover duck ID, and duck ID is very important because there's different regulations on different species of ducks. And so I guess let's see.
Yeah, there's different
Yeah.
bag limits
Yes.
for different
Yes.
species of
That's what I
ducks.
was trying to get
So
to.
we'll kind of touch on that whenever we're looking through some different pictures of ducks and some identifying features on each of them.
Okay. So on here, you have a little pie chart.
Yeah, you mind
You want to pull
pulling
that
up the
up?
first slide? Yeah, this is just the harvest composition of ducks in Oklahoma.
Hmm.
So you can see, the percentage of each species that we harvest on any given year. Uh, so you can see mallards are the highest at about 36%. And then next would be gadwall. Then we have green winged teal. So those are going to be the three most common birds in your bag if in general if you're out hunting. It's going to vary across the state
Hmm.
and, different weather, just where the ducks are.
Yeah.
So,
So do those numbers, those harvest percentages, is that because people are specifically targeting those species, or is it a numbers game, or
well, that's kind of a hard question, but people are generally going to shoot what comes into their
yeah,
decoys. People definitely have preferences for certain birds. There's diehard greenhead hunters, and
yeah.
all they want to do is shoot
I've
mallards.
hunted with a few of them.
So there's that, and then some people are just opportunistic. They take what they can get. Uh, you know, Late season teal hunt in Oklahoma is kind of a good way to get some hunting in when there's not a bunch of stale birds around,
Yeah.
or we haven't got a front pushed through yet. So
Okay. I don't know. Kind of beforehand, we kind of talked about kind of what we wanted to beforehand, we had some meetings about how we wanted to go about this today, and you had mentioned situational awareness. Can you come compound on that a little bit?
yeah, so kind of getting into starting to figure out how to identify a duck while it's flying. You can use the situation that you're in to sort of start narrowing it down. So for the most part, if you're on a pond or a backwater area, it's mostly going to be puddle ducks, and then birds like ringnecks and stuff like that will frequent those. But for the most part, you can kind of narrow it down to the puddle ducks. So that's mallards, pintail, green winged teal, things like that. Uh, so I guess that would be a good time to kind of start talking about the difference between puddle ducks and diving ducks.
Yes, yeah. Actually, that's the next thing I was going to ask, because you've already mentioned, you said dabbling, you said puddle, you said divers, and I know that's all they're kind of colloquialisms for different groups of ducks. But yeah, if you want to get into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so puddle ducks are also known as dabbling ducks. They feed by tipping their butt up in the air and kind of feeding in shallow water.
Kind of the stereotypical like cartoon of the duck feeding, where his
Yeah.
butt's up in the air and his bill's down in the water and all that.
Yeah, kind of feeding around for, aquatic insects and seeds and things like that. As opposed to a diving duck that would be in more of an open water habitat. They can dive down to, 20, 30, 50 feet deep to reach mussel beds, aquatic vegetation, invertebrates like crawdads and things like that. So,
So I remember watching a hunting show way back. This has been probably 20 years ago. Uh, I don't even remember what show it was, but they were out hunting a big water lake, shooting mallards, and they were pulling shad out of the craw. Like they'd shot a mallard, and when they picked him up, the tail was still hanging out of his mouth, and so they were pulling it out. And then after that, every mallard they shot, they were pulling it up, and almost all of them had shad.
that's interesting. Mallards are pretty opportunistic.
Mhm.
So, shad getting caught in a backwater and then the lake goes down and they're going to eat what's available because generally when they're in Oklahoma, which is their wintering grounds,
Mhm.
most of these ducks breed up in far north central United States, Canada. They make their way down here just because they get froze out up there. Well, when they're down here looking for food and stuff, they take what opportunities they can get. I would say that's pretty rare,
Well,
pretty rare circumstance.
well, yeah, because I remember watching. I was, I'm kind of age myself here, but I was probably 10 years old or so, and that was kind of what me and my dad were talking about it, and I said I thought they ate like corn and grass and stuff like that, and he goes, well, they do. He said, but I was like, I've been duck hunting for 30 years. He said, I've never heard of a mallard eating shad. He's like, but here, I mean, it wouldn't set up at all. I mean, they'd shoot a bird, dog go get it, bring it back, and they'd start. You could see the bulge in his throat, and they'd start pushing it up. And I don't know if they just happened to be sitting there on the water when a ball of shad came up, and they were just like, "Oh, here we go. Here's easy protein right here."
Cool.
But it was pretty cool. Another cool one that we were actually hunting southeast Arkansas, hunting a creek and shooting wood ducks, and every single one of them, their craw was full of acorns.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, and a wood duck's not a great big bird, and we were cleaning them. We'd open the craw just to kind of see what they were feeding on, and I mean, you'd find 20, 30 acorns in there that he had eaten that morning. So I don't know. It was just kind of cool to open that up and kind of see what they were feeding on.
Oh, yeah, and stuff like that's what you can key into when you're scouting and, those wood ducks. If there's acorns rolling down the hill, then that's that's food for them while they're here, and they
Yeah.
they take what they can get.
Yep. And just kind of relate that back to some other hunting that, I mean, especially deer hunting, which is super popular. I think most people that hunt have probably done that. Something real common with deer hunters, they'll when they're gutting their deer, they'll open the stomach up and see what they were feeding on. And then that, like you said, that gives you an idea of like, oh, I thought they'd be feeding on whatever that is that time of year, but I open up the stomach contents and it's full of something else. Well, now next year, hey, maybe that's where I need to be. And so that's something else you could do for ducks.
Sure.
When you after you harvest them, if you had a mediocre morning, you're like, well, we shot a few, and you pull them up, like, oh, they're not feeding where we thought they were, and so then you can go out the next morning. You're like, oh yeah, we need to be over here. Um, so and then kind of back on the situational awareness, or this kind of relates back to it, but how can habitat and geographic location kind of affect what kind of birds you're going to see?
Sure. So, yeah, time and place on where you're scouting or hunting, can help tell the story and kinda help narrow down your options for what ducks you're looking at. But, if you're out during early teal season,
Hmm.
generally, there's gonna be a couple different species that'll be around. So, during early teal season, you're only allowed to shoot teal. So, that's green-winged teal or blue-winged teal.
What time of year are we talking here?
So, this is usually mid-September.
Okay.
So, this year we have a 9-day early teal season. Um, for the most part, it's gonna be blue-winged teal. They're the earliest migrators,
Hmm.
going south, and then the first ones to come back north. That's because they typically winter in, Mexico, Central America, South America, stuff like that. So they got a long way to go. They get a head start on the other ducks, and that's why we have the early teal season.
Yeah,
It's
just
just to have an opportunity to harvest them, and they're one of the most abundant ducks. So yeah, time and place. You're out there in early teal season. You might have wood ducks in the area. There's some local wood ducks, so you'll have to watch out to make sure not to harvest any of them, and then some local mallards. That's pretty much what's going to be around, and then maybe some green winged teal will be mixed in too. But there's some key identifying features on wood ducks and mallards that you should be able to key in on so that you don't shoot them on accident during
mhm,
teal season.
yeah.
Um, our game wardens are out there looking for people that do that. Sometimes it's on purpose, sometimes it's on accident, but just be mindful when you're out there hunting during that time.
Yep. So, we talked about early season or early teal season, and then the main duck season within Oklahoma. I know there's a split in there, and
Hmm.
you commonly will hear referred to as first season, second season, early season, late season. Um, just in my experience, I've noticed depending on what time of the year, you'll see different species, and I guess it's kind of the same thing. Like I've noticed pintails tend to be late. I don't know if that's just anecdotal, but in my experience, first half of the season, I don't see a lot of pintails. Second half, I start seeing a bunch. Um,
Sure. So you mostly hunt out on the eastern part of the state.
yes, and so that's
So
probably
so so I will ask. Pintails are typically more of a photo migrator, which is, some people might call them a calendar bird, where
okay.
they migrate typically, and there's a lot of birds out there. They're highly variable in their behavior and things like that. But we're speaking in generalities
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
sake of the podcast. But they're going to migrate, on the photo period or the calendar, as opposed to a bird like a mallard that's just gonna follow that freeze line until they have to
Mhm.
come down this far. Because if you're a bird, you don't wanna go further than you need to and then just have to turn around in the
Yeah.
spring and
Well,
go
that's a
back.
big energy expenditure that they have to do to make that migration.
Yeah, and then they also have to leave some of the safe places that they found, so
Yep.
those pushes will kind of bring new fresh birds that don't really know where is safe on the landscape yet, so they're kinda hunting, and that's where our decoys, and when we're out there hunting,
Mhm.
those are the days we look forward to.
So, I guess another part of this would be flyways. So I know there's a handful of flyways, and then within those flyways, there's certain species that tend to frequent certain flyways more. I think
Sure.
we're in the central flyway.
Yep.
What are the most common species within that, or some ones that maybe we wouldn't see normally?
Sure. So I don't know if you got that next slide. Yeah, you can kind of see the different, uh, you know, migratory flyways in North America. Uh, you can see the central flyways in the green. We typically see all of the birds that were on that pie chart.
Mhm.
And then, sometimes we get vagrants from other flyways. But, like something like a black duck
Yeah.
is going to be strictly on the East Coast, or, cinnamon teal,
Yep.
Barrow's golden eye, things like that will be more towards the Western United States in the Pacific Flyway. So, when you're doing your homework, trying to, study up to get ready for hunting season, on working on your duck ID, you can look up, birds of the Central Flyway or ducks of the Central Flyway, and it might help you kind of key in on what you might expect to see in your local area.
Yeah, not it's not I mean, it's not a bad practice, but if you're just starting out, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to be looking at birds from Europe that you're never gonna see here, so
Sure.
it's good to kinda narrow, especially for beginners, because I know from myself and talking to some buddies that I got into duck hunting, duck ID can be, I don't wanna say stressful, but it can be difficult,
Yeah,
for new beginners.
I would definitely say it can be intimidating,
Yeah,
especially
overwhelming, yeah.
without having the bird in your hand. So,
Yeah,
look through a ID guide or look at a app that has the different birds on it and just kind of, okay, the bill is this color, as opposed to they're flying by at 50 miles an hour and
yeah.
you just can't even, it's a blur.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this, but I had an ornithology teacher in college that her big thing, she liked passerine birds. She wasn't real big on ducks. And so we did a field trip one day. Um, I think it was at Fort Gibson Lake, and we had a duck fly over, and she was like, "I wonder what that is." And I was like, "It's a pintail." She was like, "Well, how'd you know that?" So I was kind of telling her how I knew. She goes, I just didn't know. She goes, I don't know ducks very well. She goes, the ducks has not been something that I've really looked into, but yeah, that's just a fun part of being able to do it, because you once you practice it a lot, you start being able to pick up on things very quickly, and then you can tell things on the fly super easy.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, even by, the wing beat,
yep,
the way they turn, the way,
yep,
the flock kind of just presents itself when they're flying into the decoys. Those are all
yep.
just little things you can kind of study over time, try to remember what it was like when you're out there in the field and you saw it. Uh, Make it easier for the next time you have to ID them.
Yep. Cool. Well, that should get us kind of into our main point here is duck ID. So, what are some characteristics to look for, and how do we differentiate between different species?
Sure. So I guess there's a couple different, instances that you'll need to ID ducks. And I guess we can start at, you're looking at them a long ways away
Hmm.
before they even start to check out your decoys. You can see, you can kind of tell the size of the bird. So you'll be able to tell the difference between a mallard and a teal just based on the teals. Their wings are going to be going faster,
Hmm.
as opposed to, a bigger duck that might have a little bit slower wing beats. Uh, you're looking at the flock. How high off the water is it flying? If they're flying real close to the water, you can kind of narrow that down and say like, okay, that's a group of diving ducks. S Same with how they're taking off. Diving ducks, they need to get a running start before they can take off the water.
Okay.
So, like I said, you're just trying to compartmentalize them to where you can narrow it down, and then once you get them in the decoys, which is where I like to shoot them,
Hmm.
they're close and you can look at them in the eye, get a good shot on it, clean kill,
Yeah.
and you're able to ID them better at that
Yeah.
point.
You're really just kind of going through a mental flow chart. You're just yes, no questions, and then
Yeah.
you're just using that to kind of narrow it down.
But hopefully nobody's intimidated by that.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're gonna wanna get them in close before you shoot them. That way you know what you're shooting at. So that's the last time you get to really get a good
Yeah.
look at them before you pull the trigger.
All right. Well, I think you brought some pictures, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
Can we pull that up? All right. So I guess how do you want to do this? Do you just want to go through and kind of say what kind of bird it or what kind of duck it is and kind of the characteristics of it?
Yep. So we got, hopefully this doesn't bore anybody, but we're gonna go through all the ducks and look at them and kind of just some tips to what you want to look at when you're in the field.
Okay.
First one, mallard. They're, everybody's or a lot of people's target species. Pretty big, easily identifiable. As far as limit goes, the overall bag limit for ducks is 6. The limit for mallards is going to be 5 with the ability to shoot 2 hens.
Okay.
So you're going to need to have some sort of identification when you're hunting mallards regardless. But so big orange feet stick out like a sore thumb, can't miss that. And then you're also looking at what we call the speculum. That's this patch on the secondary feathers of the duck. You can see the hen on the right side of this picture. It's kind of an iridescent blue purple, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. You can't miss it. That and then the big white underside of the wing.
Hmm.
And then whenever they're kind of just floating down into the decoys, that big green head, you can't miss it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the reason why there's a limitation on the number of hens you can shoot, just because these are such a easily identifiable bird. So,
Just quick story. So my dad grew up when he first started duck hunting. They were still in the point system,
mm,
and he was talking about that. And he said drakes were worth, I think, 50 points, and he said you got a total point limit of 100.
hmm
He said mallard drakes were 50, hens were 90.
yep,
And he said, so is the only way you could go over is if your Drake put you over. And he said, so you could shoot a hen, that's 90 points. And you only get 10 points, but you could go ahead and shoot a Drake.
sure.
He said, if you shot a Drake, then you shot a hen, he said, you can get in trouble. And he said, and maybe he's wasn't correct about this, but he said there would be game wardens in the parking lot with thermometers,
Oh, wow.
and they would check body temperatures as you were coming out to determine which one you shot first. But yeah, back to the points that was back in the 70s, and stuff was wild.
But yeah, waterfowl managers, we've kind of learned from that system,
Yep.
and this is a little bit more user friendly, a little more wiggle room
Mhm.
in terms of what you can shoot, what you can't. That way, it's not putting our hunters in a position to
Yeah,
to be in that
yeah,
situation.
yeah. And I would imagine the populations are in a little bit better shape than they were in the 60s and 70s. Or is that
Yeah, it's up and down.
okay?
We'll talk about that in the next
Okay,
podcast.
awesome.
Yeah, gadwall. It's
Okay.
another one of the big pieces of the pie chart that we saw earlier. It's gadwalls, they eat more aquatic vegetation, bugs that associate with that. So they're gonna be more, anybody that hunts Oklahoma stock ponds, they shoot a lot of gadwalls.
Yep.
That's pretty common bird. What you're gonna look for is the big red wing patch and then the white bar behind it. That's easy way to tell it apart. Another name for a gadwall is just a gray duck.
Okay.
Despite any other, identifying features, it's just kind of a gray, plain looking duck. Uh, don't get me wrong, they're really pretty. Sometimes
Oh yeah.
they can have a little iridescence on their head with a little purple on it.
Yeah, I have seen some really pretty Drake gadwalls.
Yeah.
That was something that growing up, because we mostly like mallards and widgeons, and every now you'd get a gadwall and we weren't mad at it, but it wasn't like what we were looking for. And every now and then you'd shoot a gadwall, everybody's like, all right, that's a good looking gadwall right there.
Yeah, definitely underappreciated duck.
Yeah.
They're pretty good table fare too.
Doesn't say yeah, and they're good to eat.
Yeah, blue wing teal, green wing teal. I put them on the same slide just for a little bit of, you know, just show the difference between
Mhm.
them. But the picture of the flock on the left is a really good example of how their flock looks when they're flying or kind of banking around the corner to come in the decoys. Uh, teal are they're not the fastest duck, but they seem like it when they're headed in your
They sound
decoys.
like it
Yeah,
too.
so they just kind of erratic move, flights when they're coming in. They can unlike most ducks, they won't necessarily land into straight into the wind like you would expect a lot. So makes for some pretty exciting wing shooting.
Mhm.
Uh so pretty difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, blue wing teal on the left, you can see the big blue wing on it. The only duck that's gonna have that big blue wing patch, and that's one of their closest relatives, is a northern shoveler.
Okay.
So we're gonna talk about those in a slide in a minute, but that's also a bird you need to kind of look out for during early teal season and just kind of know the difference. And the best way to tell is that teal just they don't have that big shovel beak on them.
Yeah.
So the bill is definitely one of the features you need to kind of key in on. It's usually silhouetted against the back, your whatever your background is that you can kind of look at. On the right are some green winged teal, just kind of hanging out in some shallow water habitat. That's where they live. They need shallow water to feed. It's relatively small duck.
Yeah.
so they can't, dabble as deep as something like a mallard.
Yep. Yeah, that's a super common that's at least in my experience, I grew up hunting around Keystone and a lot of those shallow water sloughs and stuff,
Oh yeah.
and I mean, that is a bird you see every single time you go. So,
Yeah, green winged teal rescue a lot of hunts for a lot
yeah,
of
they
people.
do.
So
They
yeah.
sure do, and like you said, they're good food. I mean, they real good table fare. They're fun to shoot. Um, you kinda get the experience of hunting diver ducks, but in a puddle duck.
Sure.
'Cause
Yeah.
they fly real low, they fly real fast, and they'll just kinda come out of nowhere and just kinda bombard you a little bit.
Yep. And they're very responsive to decoys.
Yes, yeah, a lot of
So
times when you don't have to call, you don't do anything, you're just sitting there and you hear something hit the water and you look out there and you've got a dozen different green winged teal that just hit the water, so.
see, I don't know if you got that green winged teal brought up. Yeah, I guess in this picture you can't see, but they've got a green wing patch on them, green wing teal, and then the males are going to have a red head with a green sort of eye patch,
Yeah,
and you can't miss it when you're hand. They're really pretty.
yeah, and as far as puddle duck goes, I think they're the smallest outside of they are the smallest, aren't
Yep,
they?
green wing teal are
Yeah.
going to be the smallest, and then there's another teal that we sometimes get in Oklahoma, and that's a cinnamon teal, very rare and
Yeah.
uncommon, but sometimes out west that they'll come across a couple. Um, yeah, just before we get going any further, I was gonna mention that there's, apps, and Ducks Unlimited has an app that, whenever I was kind of learning to ID ducks, it was pretty helpful. You sit down
Mhm.
at breakfast after the hunt and just kind of go through the ducks you looked at. And it has a function where you can listen to the different sounds they make.
Oh, okay.
So pretty cool. Hopefully that, some of our listeners are able to utilize some of those resources. Pintail. Nice.
These are my favorite.
Cool. Well, they're a lot of people's favorite.
Mhm.
So these are another bird that has a species limit that's smaller than the
Yeah.
overall duck bag limit. So this year is the first year that the limit's going to be three pintails per bag. There's no sex restriction, but they're fairly easily identifiable in the air. They have the long neck,
Yep.
uh, long sprig in the back. They're pintail.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's a trophy bird for most duck hunters.
Yeah, and it's especially growing up because we didn't see them very often growing up. That was always one of the ones, like, anytime we heard pintails, we it the hunt got very serious at that point.
Yeah.
It went from, "Hey, we're here to have fun," to, "Hey, we need to buckle down and get this bird right here." Because it's a beautiful bird, and then I don't know if maybe I'm out of my mind on this, but anecdotally, I've noticed the way they approach decoys is different.
Yeah, they're very shy birds.
Yeah, they'll swing out. In my experience, if we ever actually get them to work, they'll swing way out and they get real low and then they come in low. It's not like a mallard or a gadwall where they might swing overhead, cup up, and then come almost straight down into the decoys. Because we've had days where there's a bad glare or something, so you can't quite make out what you're seeing.
Mhm.
And when I see them make that long pass where they swing, they may get 10 feet off the water, but they're 100 yards out coming in. And I would turn my buddies. I'm like, hey, I'm like 90% sure these are going to be pintails. And by the time they get close enough where we can actually see what they are, I don't know that I've been wrong.
Sure.
So it's just, and that's something else you can kind of look out for. Kind of like we were talking about earlier, is flight patterns.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
they have a pretty unique whistle. Uh,
yes.
you guys asked me to bring some duck calls, but I opted out of that for the comment section. So yeah, just some of those resources like I was telling, the app or the Cornell Lab
Yeah.
website,
Yep.
they'll have audio and you can listen to what they do, and you know mimicking a duck's noises, duck calling is a good way to help them get in the decoys.
Yep. So this is also a lot of people's favorites.
Yeah, wood duck. So we have a pretty good resident wood duck population in Oklahoma. They breed here. They stay here for the most part. They might migrate south a little bit. Uh, Beautiful bird. So this is where the situational awareness thing kind of comes into play. For the most part, wood ducks. Where do you think wood ducks are going to be?
The woods.
Right on. So yeah, they're generally in wooded areas. They eat acorns, aquatic plants, aquatic invertebrates like most other ducks. They're going to be in tight areas. They're really shifty in the air. Trying to find words for how wings flap is kind of hard sometimes, but they're pretty erratic flying through the woods. Uh, very distinguishable call that they make. It's almost like a screech noise.
Mm-hmm.
Some homework for the viewers. Would that call?
How was that?
That's better than I could have done. So, and then the hen, they're gonna have that blue speculum on their secondary feathers, similar to a mallard, but the white around their eye, and then almost the mullet on the back is
Yeah.
is a good way to
Yep.
distinguish them in the hand. So, widgeon.
I know
So,
this one by a couple different names.
yeah,
Yeah. We always called them cotton tops.
okay, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, widgeon, pretty common duck to be harvested in Oklahoma. Uh, yeah, pretty identifiable. They're almost like a green winged teal with the green eye patch on the drake, but
Mm-hmm.
instead of red, it's cream colored. They have a sprig that's fairly similar to a pintail.
I have confused widgeons with some immature pintails.
Sure, and so when they're flying into the decoys, one thing I always notice, you don't get a good look at the wing patch on them in that picture, but there's a lot of white to them when they're
Mm-hmm.
when they're coming in the
Yep.
decoys. The bottom of the wing, uh, so in their head. So
Yeah. And then something else. We always talked about big ducks too. So big ducks, little ducks. It was always another differentiator that we used. Widgeons kind of fall in between. They're kind of a medium sized duck.
yep,
They're smaller than a mallard or a gadwall, but they're bigger than teal, bigger than shovelers. They're kind of a oddball size.
sure. And yeah, another thing I wanted to mention is they're pretty common in dry field hunting as
Mm-hmm.
well. So them and mallards are going to be the dominant species you'll see if you're hunting dry
Yeah.
fields.
Yeah. I haven't shot many on hunting big water lakes. It's mostly been farm ponds or like you said, in a dry field.
Yep, stock ponds are definitely a favorite hide for them too. Northern shoveler. So like I said, these are really close relatives to blue wing teal. You can see the blue wing patch on their wing. But the easiest feature to ID them by is the big, they're called a shoveler, the shovel nose bill
Yep.
on them. So you can't really miss that. Uh, yeah, not a whole lot of other, they use that bill to kind of filter invertebrates out on mud flats, stuff like that. You might find them on big water. And then the hen looks remarkably similar to a
Yes.
mallard hen. So, they got that minus the speculum on their wing, they look pretty close. So, like I said, use that bill and you can ID it from there.
Yeah. Spoonbills are another one they're usually pretty easy
Sure.
to identify. I think they get a bad rap too. I think at least growing up, we had hunted with a bunch of guys that they're puddle ducks. It's a puddle duck, but they want to treat it like a diver, and so they were like, "Man," because they don't tend to be all that hard to decoy.
Yeah, and
So
and I, they get a bad rap. They had that big shovel nose.
yeah,
People kind of associate that with digging around in the mud,
yes,
stuff
yeah,
like that. But they're just another puddle duck in terms of taste and being
yeah.
fair.
First when I first started hunting on my own or with my buddies without my dad, we shot a couple, and I was like, "Man," I was like, "We're gonna clean them because we shot them," but I was like, "I don't know." We ate it; it was fine.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's totally fine. Gregarious, switch some categories here.
Yeah, so that's most of the puddle ducks you'll encounter, or at least all the common ones you'll
Yeah.
encounter in Oklahoma. So now I kind of want to switch to the divers. Like I said, if you're out scouting or something like that, you can ID them by, divers. They're going to need a running start over the water to take off. Puddle duck's going to just pop up. So that's a good starting point. Here we're going to talk about scop. We have a lesser scop and a greater scop. They're very similar when
Hmm.
you look at them. The male is going to have a blue bill. That's their other name, blue bill.
Yep.
Uh, the female has the white patch around their bill.
Okay.
And yeah, besides that, they, pretty identifiable bird. The one thing about them is that in Oklahoma, the limit is one
One
per day
Scott.
per bag. So you'll have to watch out for that. And for some people, it's pretty frustrating when you're watching them
Mhm.
flying through the decoys all morning after you get it, but sit back and enjoy the show.
Yeah, that's just a part of duck hunting is seeing some ducks way off, and you get excited, and then they start coming out. Oh, oh, oh! Well, everybody, hold on, fingers off the trigger.
Yep.
Can't shoot these.
Yeah, and I mean they're really close to, well, even on an overcast day, the silhouette of one, they get these big cheeks on them. They look really close to a redhead. If
Hmm.
well, yeah, if it's overcast.
Speaking of redheads,
Redheads next. Similar habitat as scaup. They're a diving duck. You can see the hen in the right on in flight. It looks pretty plain. So we have a limit of 2 redheads per day in
okay,
Oklahoma. So it's another bird that you'll kind of want to watch out for when you're in the field. Yep, the male's red, blue bill, yellow eye, pretty identifiable bird. That
yep,
big black neck patch or ring, that's what I look for when they're flying through the decoys to differentiate them from scaup. Sometimes those colors are just hard to make out when
yeah,
if it's overcast or when they're flying pretty fast.
yeah. When you get a bird at 50 miles an hour, it's sometimes, well, I don't know what that was.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I do quite a bit of diver hunting myself,
Hmm.
and if I take one of my buddies that's never done it before, my main thing is once you shoot it, you make sure it's dead, or else they'll dive under and
Yep.
you'll never see them again. So just one part of being a responsible hunter is making sure that you take care of your game and you know recover it responsibly.
Yeah,
So
being a responsible and ethical hunter. Yeah. All right. What's next? Oh, that's another one of my favorites.
canvasback,
Right.
nice. So yeah, limit on canvasback is going to be 2. Some people might confuse it with a redhead. It's got this big, dark, swooping bill. It's a Delta waterfowl symbol,
Yep.
kind of cool. It stands out. Uh,
It's a
they're
big duck too.
they're a big duck, but they're surprisingly acrobatic whenever they come
Hmm.
into the decoys. Swinging back and forth. Uh, Beautiful bird, cool trophy. Uh, there's that hen. I like that picture of the hen. It's eating a mussel off the bottom of a lake. They feed on
Yep.
mollusks and aquatic invertebrates, stuff like that. They can dive really deep. So
I had a one of the coolest days I've ever had duck hunting. It was me and a couple of my buddies were hunting a slough, and my dad and a couple of his buddies were hunting a farm pond an hour away, and we were just kind of texting each other, joking like, "Oh, we've shot 3," and my dad takes, "Well, we've shot 4," and he sent me a picture. And they shot 2 canvasbacks off a farm pond. Don't know why. It was in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lake anywhere near it. Just one of those oddball deals. And he was like, I bet you can't beat that. And it was super cool. And then not 5 minutes later, I shot my first pintail that had a sprig on it that was 8 to 10 inches long. Beautiful bird. Matter of fact, I've got it mounted at the house. When we picked him up, there wasn't a feather out of place on him. And I sent a picture of that and I was like, I think I beat you. And he was like, oh man, he was so upset because we're both pretty competitive. So,
sure. Goldeneye, common goldeneye.
mhm.
So in Oklahoma, we have common goldeneyes. Out west, there's Barrow's goldeneye.
Okay.
This is what you'll see in Oklahoma. So this is only a picture of a drake. I kind of just, there's 2 birds in this picture. The one in the front is with the greenish iridescence on its head. That's an adult. The one behind it is a juvenile male. So I put that on there just to kind of point that out. A lot of people will shoot golden eyes and they'll have them in the hand and they'll say, okay, this is a hen golden eye because it's got a brown head. And then sometimes it's as clear as it is in this picture, but sometimes it's just a faint white marking on the outside of the bill, and that's just a first year goldeneye drake.
Oh, okay.
So the first year goldeneye drake and the hens look very similar in their color, but yeah, I just thought that picture was cool.
I think, and while we're on that subject, I think that's a good topic to bring up because that is pretty common with a lot of ducks. Is that as far as juveniles versus adults? Because I have shot uh, juvenile Drake mallards that at first glance I thought were hens, just because
Sure.
they weren't in full plumage. It's usually early season. They
Yep.
weren't full plumage.
And so even earlier in the year, a mallard drake might not, even if it's an adult, a second, third year, it still might not have its breeding plumage. And that's a
Mhm.
point I'm glad you brought up to point out in all of these pictures. I picked ducks in these pictures
Yes.
that are full breeding plumage. So they're starting to get these feathers throughout the duck season, but they don't really get to that beautiful breeding plumage till pretty late in the year. Up in North Dakota, South Dakota, they're shooting most of the ducks they shoot are just brown ducks.
Yeah.
They're really hard to ID. They don't have their breeding plumage yet, and by the time they make it down here, they generally do. But earlier in November, it's kind of iffy.
Yep.
Bufflehead, uh, beautiful duck. You can see the drake on the left and the hen on the right. In the air, they're really compact, similar size to a teal, but they're a diving duck. They have you can kind of see it in the picture of this drake, but they got pink feet on them, and that's one way,
Hmm.
surefire way to tell a bufflehead when it's flying in the decoys. I, on one hand, try not to shoot at them because I'll waste a whole box of shells trying to get one of them. So, um, cool duck.
Pink feet. That is. See, I haven't shot a ton of divers. I've shot a few, but bufflehead. I think I've only ever shot one bufflehead.
Sure.
And the pink feet. I had never heard of that.
Did you get it mounted?
I did not.
No, I've let
No, that was a scary morning. We about sank a boat.
ringneck. I definitely wanted to throw this one in the presentation. It's a very common. So it's in the diving duck category,
Hmm.
but it's really common on farm ponds.
Okay.
I don't know if you pointed it out earlier, but a flock of ringnecks flying over the blind
Yeah.
sounds like a fighter jet. So
Yeah.
screaming over you, super fast,
Yeah.
and they'll end up in the decoys before you can blink. So pretty cool duck. You can tell you can see their bill, how they have this almost a bluish ring or white ring and then some bluish behind it. But they're, I picked this picture particularly because it shows the ring on their neck for which they get their name.
Yeah.
So it's just a kind of a light brown ring around an adult breeding plumage male. A lot of people think it's from the bill, but and then the hands on the right side of the picture. So these are some mergansers. I might have left out the hooded merganser, but so on the left is a common merganser, and the right is a red-breasted merganser.
Okay. These are not ones I'm very familiar with.
So, and not to a lot of duck hunters. They're pretty common in Oklahoma, out in big water, like out in the middle of the lake.
Okay.
So you won't really come across them very often when you're in, a puddle duck hunting situation. But out in the middle of the lake, they're feeding on shad mostly, some mussels, things like that, and they do not go very close to shore. That's why most hunters don't
Okay.
encounter them. So, you could sit there all morning and they'll just fly 70 yards out all morning if you're in the right spot. But pretty frustrating if you're trying to target them. I know a lot of hunters in Oklahoma are just you know want to shoot all the different types of
Yeah.
birds, and these are two pretty frustrating ones for most.
I don't think I've ever at least had anyone close enough to even make an ID on one.
Sure, and they're generally very late in the season,
Okay.
just when they get pushed out of Kansas, they're just following that ice line, trying to have open water that they can get
Yeah.
out and feed and swim around in.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't leave it off. Hooded merganser, beautiful bird. You'll encounter these in some puddle duck hunting situations. Uh, Very fast, cool bird. There's not much to it. You can't miss the big
Yeah.
hood on the drake. The hands, if you're really keyed in, you can see
Hmm.
that she's got a hood on the back. Uh, yeah, beautiful bird. Not much to it.
What we got next?
Geese. I had to throw this one in there. I get questions all the time. So in Oklahoma, we have a couple different types of geese that you might encounter. For the most part, or I'm trying to figure out a good way to explain this, but so we have geese here year round. They're
Yep.
going to be the big goose on the right. This is a cackling goose on the left and a giant Canada goose on the right. Cackling goose is a group that combines three different species. They look very similar of Arctic nesting geese.
Okay.
So they're going to migrate down similar to ducks, similar timing, but they're mostly going to focus on areas with a lot of agriculture
Okay.
because they go out to the fields and eat corn, and then they go roost and loaf on farm ponds, big reservoirs, stuff like that. They're
Hmm.
mostly on the west side of I-40, or sorry, I-35.
Okay.
So mostly the western part of the state. That's where you'll encounter cackling geese, and then you encounter big geese year round. So big geese, small geese, one way to put it. Cackling geese, honkers.
Yep.
That's another word I like to
That's
use.
we always called them. We'd be sitting there and you'd hear them way off the distance.
Oh yeah,
Somebody go, honkers, get ready. And then we had one guy that could actually blow a goose call pretty well. And so, all right, Chris, it's your turn.
and for the most part, cackling geese are going to travel in large flocks. So
Yeah.
100, 200, 300, where you can get Canada geese or honkers in smaller groups.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I just wanted to talk about not ducks for a minute,
Yep.
just because
This is a very important part of duck ID is being able to tell what is not a duck
yeah,
because again, it goes back to the whole regulations deal and being ethical. You don't want to shoot things that aren't game birds. Cormorant.
cormorant. I was gonna wait and see what you called them, but
Well, you hear water turkeys, cormorants, and there's another one's real similar, anhinga.
yeah, that's a similar species, but yeah, water turkey, fish duck, things like
Oh,
that.
yeah, I've heard fish duck.
Uh, that's what a lot of people call them. You know, you go hunting with a new buddy that's never been duck hunting before,
Mhm.
and they're all day just, "Oh, ducks are coming," and I'm like, "No, that's a
Mhm.
cormorant." I'm like, "You get one more false alarm, but that's about it." So, you know, cormorants, they share similar habitats at a lot of these reservoirs. They're not a game bird. There's no season for them. They're not. You're not allowed to take them while
Yep.
you're out there in the field. So, not that you would want to. They probably don't taste that good.
They
Given their diet of fish and
yeah, they
shad.
just don't look like they would taste very
Yeah.
good.
Next one's a loon.
Yep.
Looks a lot like a duck. Is also not a duck.
Yeah.
So there's no season or, you know, it, loons are not open to harvest in any state. They're a lot bigger than a duck. Somebody might confuse one with a goose or a brant or something, but
Okay, yeah.
they're not. When they land, they actually land just straight on their belly, almost like water skis.
Huh.
Pretty cool. Hope our viewers can Google that video afterwards, but
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Loons are cool. I love their call.
yeah,
The call is so anytime you're watching a movie and they're out in the middle of the forest on a lake and you hear that like, I don't even know how to it's almost like a cry.
sure.
That is a loon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, cool. All right.
Let's see. We got any more PowerPoint
No, I think
slides?
that's it. So, what are the best ways that people can go out and kind of practice this? To practice their duck ID.
Sure. Go out there and look for some ducks before duck season. There's no better way to get better at IDing ducks than get the binoculars, go out on the lake, and see what you find.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna have to get out there and find a spot anyway. You might as well kind of start practicing IDing them. Pay attention to when they're locked up coming in. What do they look like? How are their flocks? Sort of flying together, things like that. But yeah, it's just practice.
Yep. And like you said, I mean, the internet obviously it's an incredible resource. You said Ducks Unlimited was one of them. The Merlin Bird ID app is a great one for especially when you're out scouting because you can download that. Then it's
Yeah.
all offline. You don't have to have internet service. And it's like you said, they got the calls, they got pictures, they got hens and drakes, they've got immatures, they've got adults. I mean, they've got everything you need.
Yeah, and some of those, I mean, even have like a journaling function,
Yeah.
or just keep a journal of the ducks I shoot throughout the season. Helps me go back next year and kind of time out, my hunting trips. Oh wow, we shot, this many ducks on this week. It might, of course, watch the weather and you know freeze line stuff like that to kind of time that. But good way to kind of remember which ducks you shot, help
Mhm.
visualize your identification.
Awesome. Well, I think we've kind of covered everything. Um, do you want to close this out with a hunting story? Fun hunting story?
Yeah, I think I got one. Hunting story. Okay, so in Oklahoma, we have a youth and veteran hunting day.
Hmm.
It's usually Saturday before season opens and the Saturday after season closes. So my grandpa's a veteran, and I took him out last year, and so I have my first bird dog right now, and so
Oh, okay.
last year the date fell on February 1st, and I had this pup. He's about 4 months old, and he missed all duck season because I felt bad leaving him home, and we get February 1st was 65 degrees.
Ooh, a
Yeah.
little warm.
So I'm like, "Okay, he can handle it." So brought him out, I'm not shooting. I just tagged along with my grandpa. He shot a couple ducks, and my pup was able to go out and get his first retrieves. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Watching your dog get his first retrieve is so much fun.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, just to wrap up the season, kinda give him something to look
Yep.
forward to for next season and kinda start to understand the game a little bit.
Yep. Yep. Well, I think that kind of does it. Really appreciate you coming on, man, and talking to us about this. This is duck ID is very important, especially if you're going to start waterfowl hunting. Just kind of reiterate, it doesn't have to be super overwhelming. I know it can be daunting because you're going to look up ducks and you're going to find a list of 40, 50 different species. And it's like, well, you can kind of narrow that down.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to do today, was just kind of give people a doorway into, here's how you can start. Here's where you should start. These are some ideas you can take away. So
Sure. Yeah. And anybody else, that's been into duck hunting for a while, that sat through, 50 minutes of this episode, take one of your buddies hunting. I mean, that's the best way to do it. And if you haven't been hunting, bug one of your buddies to take you hunting, because that's the best way to learn and, kind of get dialed in.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks to everybody out at home watching. We'll see you on the next one.